Super excited today to welcome Chris Kelly, CEO and co-founder of Clearion. I think it's going to be a great discussion today. Chris has a very unique perspective developing software solutions for the industry, for the field, for utilities. So he's got a very interesting company and he's been doing this for 15 plus years. So let's get into it. This is an exciting day because we've been trying to schedule this for a bit, and we talked to Chris and we've obviously been using the Clearion software. But before we dive too much in, Chris, maybe you can tell our audience a little bit about what Clearion does, and a little backstory of how you started the software company like 15 plus years ago.
Yeah, so it was a little over 15 years ago. And my co-founder and I had worked together in another geospatial software company focusing on utilities. And mobile technology was starting to get real for some of these use cases. And we had heard people at our utility customers talk about this thing called vegetation management. And we said, how hard could that be? It's just, trimming trees. And 15 years later, we're realizing how much we still have to learn. But we've been focusing on the office management, the management for multi-year tree trimming programs, vegetation management programs, and then really getting that information out to the field to arborists, different contractor roles, auditors, and a lot of financial and regulatory reporting and supply chain management. It's a pretty expansive solution, and we feel like we still focus on a fairly narrow part of the overall vegetation management technology and broader workflow.
I think our touch with Clarion has been only in a part of the suite of services, but you'd call it a suite of services, right? A suite of software solutions for the field, like work management stuff, but also back-end stuff as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really got to be both. You've got to have this vast amount of work, well organized, but you also have to get very specific information out to the right people in the field, and allow utility companies to manage a portfolio of contractors where we need to have data separated and make sure we keep the grid safe from cybersecurity threats. And it's a lot.
That's a challenge because there's so many people involved in the vegetation management process. Does the idea that they have to all be integrated into one system.
For sure. Absolutely.
Obviously, utilities, large organizations, lots of different stakeholders. And from a software perspective, where does who owns the decision-making process? So is your sort of solution live with the technology decision makers in the utility, or is it owned by the business?
It probably depends on the utility. It's definitely a question. I mean, I think that, utility IT organizations, obviously need to be hyper aware of cybersecurity. And there's also, just a general trend in the industry to try to, I think they call it vendor rationalization, try to have a smaller footprint of vendors providing IT products and services just so it can be manageable. So it's, I think the fair way to characterize it is that, it is a mixture of IT review and giving their blessing and making sure that what the business unit, what the operating business unit is buying is consistent and compatible with the things that IT cares about. But it also has to work for a very complex organization in vegetation management, despite our very early expectations, is, as Phil said, quite complicated.
It's such a narrow and niche area that you focus on. Is it competitive? Like, is there a lot of players out there? Like, I mean, I only can think of like a handful, but
yeah, it is. I think that there's a very small number of companies that do kind of exactly what we do, but there is a lot of technology and there are a lot of ways of coming at this. I mean, in a way, spreadsheets are competitive with what we do, and then there are a lot of more point solution type tools, smart form tools. We partner with Esri for all of our underlying, geospatial technology and server technology. And I mean, they're tools that Esri offers that can be pretty easily configured to do parts of this. And then, there's an interest within the utility industry of, can we do this with existing tools? So, looking at ERP systems, looking at things like SAP or Maximo that do kind of enterprise level work management, financial management. A lot of what we do is very relevant to those systems. And there have been attempts to, try to just build a front end to your enterprise work management. And those have kind of achieved varying success. I think that approach or that kind of looking at enterprise work management platforms as a way to give vegetation management organizations, their day-to-day management tools and field dispatch tools. I think the industry is concluding that, maybe it's better to have a more purpose-built tool for the operations day to day and just kind of roll up the relevant information to the enterprise. But yeah, there's still there's a lot of activity, I think there's a lot of capital coming into utility vegetation management, a lot of investments around remote sensing. There are technology tools that are coming out of that. So it's an active space. We have a very mature solution. But we certainly wouldn't say that we're without competition.
Chris, I understand Clarion draws on a lot of global resources, has a global reach. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, and then talk about cybersecurity, or how security is affected by that? Because I know a lot of utilities probably are interested in data that never leaves the continent. Is that true?
Very true. All of the above. So yeah. So my co-founder is a guy I met about 20 years ago. He had moved to the States from Israel, worked at Intel, and we hired him at my previous company, and then we started Clearion together. He ended up moving his family back to Israel. So we've been running the company as a global organization for over 10 years. We have a team in Israel, developer team in Israel, and then about 5 years ago we began developing a relationship with some software developers in Ukraine, and they're all in eastern Ukraine, so a long way from the conflict that's going on. But with cybersecurity, critical infrastructure protection, it's just the concerns over how our customers' data is secured, how our products and our product development process is secured, is obviously top of mind. So, we onboard all of our team members, regardless of where they are, kind of at a US, NERC CIP standard. There's an enormous amount of product code security, some technologies that we're leveraging around source code management and, multi-factor authentication, all the cybersecurity buzzwords, we're definitely on top of, because, utility companies, maybe 5-7 years ago, they wanted to know, if you have cloud hosting infrastructure, if you're delivering software as a service, are your servers secure? And is your data secure? Is our customers' data staying, in the U.S. and that's important, and we achieve that very well for our customers. But as the U.S. government and the industry groups have started looking, more broadly at grid resiliency and cybersecurity for our critical infrastructure, that has flowed down into, things like I'm sure you all have heard of. Everybody gets a background check if you're going to be a contractor, and then looking more in deeper into the supply chain. The technologies that we use, foundational technology like Esri and Microsoft, and Apple and Android, all the way up through the actual code that we build, is all very complexly and effectively monitored and protected. So it's not a destination. It's a journey, because we get new questionnaires from utility companies almost every year saying, these are our new standards. This is what you guys need to meet, and that's what we follow.
Since we're talking about international, how does the U.S. Veg management market and its use of technology compared to England, the EU, others? Are there things we should be learning?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we don't currently have a customer footprint in the EU or anywhere in Europe. Our customers are in North America, New Zealand, and Australia, and we have one customer as of this year in South America. I think there's an enormous amount of interest that we're seeing in Latin America around digital vegetation management tools, and that includes remote sensing plus the kind of the work management stuff that we do. Australia was our first international, the location of our first international customer. Outside of Canada, in the U.S., I'll say, our first outside of North America customer, and a lot of that was driven by wildfire risk management concerns. So I think that there's a lot of similarities, analogies between what they're dealing with and what we're dealing with in the U.S. From an operational and technology perspective. What's really interesting, though, is looking at kind of the different approaches to vegetation management that drive how our software gets implemented. So, for example, in New Zealand, they have some really interesting national regulations that they just treat tree trimming at the utility level differently than we do here. So there's kind of this idea of certain landowners, certain problematic trees near distribution lines. Eventually the utilities say, this could become your responsibility. So there's a lot of kind of landowner, tree owner, private utility customer type of communications and negotiations and tree level or parcel level agreements that could come into place. But as far as the technology, I think that Europe, from what I understand, is definitely leaning into remote sensing, and it's something that we're kind of tracking in terms of how they're leveraging remote sense data, and then how we can help them operationalize that through our tools.
Chris, is your software and your team that you have in place, are you guys able to sort of pivot and modify the solution for other utility assets? And can you basically then say, hey, this is applicable to all utility infrastructure, not just the tree side of the business?
Yeah, and that's when we started the company, we didn't want to put ourselves out to the market as kind of a generic mobile GIS, mobile work management tool. We really wanted to focus on a specific problem, and the problem that we picked was vegetation management. So I think most of our customers are using our software for vegetation management. It's sort of how we're known, mostly in the industry. But from the very early days, we were helping customers, either contractor organizations or infrastructure owners, managers, the utilities themselves, look at other problems, asset inventory, going out and making sure that your asset GIS is the poles and the structures are in the right place in your digital asset records, and are all the attributes about them accurate. We would get a vegetation management organization say, we do all of the core vegetation management workflows, and then we also inspect pad-mounted transformers. Can you give us a pad-mounted transformer inspection form? And the answer has always been yes. Since we redeveloped our technology platform, to be web-based and app and phone-based, and leveraging some more kind of real-time data communication capabilities, we've preserved our approach to software development, which is these things have to be flexible. If you want to go to a country with kind of different regulations, different approaches, we've got to be flexible. We don't want to be building custom software. We want to have a software platform that can be configured, without having a bunch of custom code bases floating around. So we've preserved that, and we have in the last couple of years gotten much more involved in overhead asset inspection and maintenance management, both for electric distribution assets and electric transmission assets. And then, the other big area for us has been around environmental and sustainability and community engagement solutions that are really integrated into field operations for utilities and for DOTs for that matter. But that kind of reach out to environmental compliance, to sustainability. I think about the pollinator habitat initiative is something we've been very involved with, and then just even looking at opportunities to do things like connecting utility contractors, vegetation management contractors with nonprofits that need wood chips. It's incredible. I sit on the board of a park that has a preservation board. It's actually the last big development that Frederick Law Olmsted did. So he did a neighborhood in Chicago, and of course DC, New York, Chicago World's Fair, and then the very last neighborhood and park that he developed about 100 years ago is in my neighborhood, and it's this beautiful park. And one of their biggest problems is they can't get enough wood chips. It's like, wow, I happen to know, a few thousand trucks a day that are just burning up diesel and burning up windshield time trying to find a place to dump wood chips.
You're like, I have the answer.
Yeah.
It's a win-win in that situation.
That's awesome.
Is. Yeah.
Okay.
That realization, before I got on the board of the park, my son, who's a high schooler, during COVID, he was told he could get some extra credit for his biology class if he went and volunteered at this community farm. It's a really cool organization. They grow a lot of food. It's in town, kind of in the city of Atlanta, and they actually give food to local schools where they have some food insecurity. They partner with a women's transitional facility for women that are getting out of the prison system, and they get training on becoming farmers. And then there's education that goes on. And we went out there to volunteer. I went out there, and the only thing we did was haul wood chips. And the biology teacher, talked all about why wood chips are so important for farming, and we learned about mycelium, and I said, "Where do you get your wood chips?" She's like, "Oh, it's such a pain. You wouldn't believe how hard it is." I'm like, "All right." So we connected them with Georgia Power, and now they through our app, the Georgia Power crews can open up their crew application and see if there are any wood chip donation sites that are in need, and contact information. It's really simple, it's and this is why, we talk about, utility vegetation management it's so serious and complicated, and there's reliability concerns, there's safety concerns, there's public perception impacts, there's regulatory impacts. It's very complex, and our belief is that you need a good system to manage all of the facets of your program, and you need to be able to peel stuff out for specialty programs. You need to get contractors the right stuff and not the wrong stuff, but you need to bring it all together. So building this, this flexible platform, once you get that in place, you're able to really innovate, and things that are easy from a technology perspective, but hard to do if you don't have software. Flexibility is key for us. And
we all kind of live in the same ecosystem, but we're leading very different types of organizations, right? And something that I'm just obsessed with and super interested in is always like how other leaders manage their organization. Obviously, we went through COVID. You've got parts of your team globally and scattered through the US. Like, how are you as a leader of your company able to kind of maintain the culture that you want and the efficiencies that you want, especially in the current environment, right? Where just the world has changed, dramatically. So what's that been like as a leader of a software company?
Yeah, it's been an exciting couple of years, no doubt. With COVID, we actually moved our Atlanta office, moved our headquarters to Flex Workspace. We still have our physical space in our Vermont office. The Atlanta decision was driven, largely by traffic.
Right.
Well, you're from Houston, Tej. I don't have to tell you.
I know. I get it. Trust me, I get it.
But we have these cross-functional teams, and what we're finding is that from almost day one, we needed to be able to work in a disconnected mode, because we had people that were in different states, we had people in different countries. So we got good at that. When COVID forced us to shockingly send everybody home, we were in pretty good position to do that. It was fairly seamless. We've since more based on just the growth and complexity of our organization. We've grown our teams really in every kind of functional role. We've got just a lot more people here at Clarion than we did even before COVID started 2.5 years ago. So we're implementing a lot more just really good work management, kind of software company systems. I'll give a plug to Atlassian. We're a big Jira shop, and obviously Zoom, Slack has been our blessing, and sometimes our curse if we are on 9 hours of Zoom meetings a day. But as far as the culture goes, that's always been a challenge, of course, right? You're bringing in people from the utility world that don't really know software, bringing in software people that really need to understand the problem that we're solving and why it's so important. It's vitally important, and there's so many opportunities to not just help these professionals be good at their jobs, but also to help them innovate outside, like we talked about with some of the ways that utilities can give back and just improve the experience that their customers have with them on what's sometimes a fairly unpopular thing of trimming trees or removing trees. And then, communicating to the team at Clarion, why do we believe in, things like pollinator habitat? It's not just because, butterflies are pretty to put on your website, but it's an endangered species situation, and one of the things I learned from the right-of-way habitat as habitat working group is in a lot of cases a third of the cost of the food that we eat is just the cost of pollinators, right? So it's crazy, and so when you find out that the work that you do, that your kids just can't understand, and your family says after 15 years, like, what do you do again? Help me understand. It's like, well, you ever heard of pollinator decline? Well, we're helping with that, and it's just connecting what we do, which is, it's hard. It's very technical. It's nobody at a dinner party wants to talk about cybersecurity, but I can tell you, I've been on a call this morning about cybersecurity and talking about servers and are we scaling this customer up to be able to support 1,000 users on their on-premise servers? Those things are real, and we have to be good at that. But I think that it's really important for our team to understand why this is important more globally, and the impact on worker safety and the impact on reliability, and then the things that we can do, in a small way, but in a meaningful way to help, the work that we're supporting, be more sustainable, reduce emissions, preserve pollinator habitats. Because if these things happen, I mean, it looks very likely that the monarch butterfly is going to be listed as a threatened or endangered species very soon, and that's going to have a real impact on utility companies, any right-of-way management organization, and their ability to work in the way they do. It's probably going to mean more seasonal type of work, and so with the right-of-way habitat working group, there's this legal framework that's been negotiated by utility industry. EPRI's been involved. There's a university involved, University of Illinois Chicago. They've negotiated with the federal government this kind of pre-listing conservation agreement where you can basically begin complying with certain types of pollinator preservation ahead of the listing, so that there's a little bit more leeway for you to keep working. So basically, the Endangered Species Act, when the monarch gets listed, I mean, it's real, right? I mean, it's going to have a real operational impact on people that are mowing and cutting and spraying herbicide. And we need the grid to stay online. We need to, we still have to do the work, but we got to figure that out.
One thing that's really cool about your lens, I'm a big software person. I love the digitization of most things. And I feel like you have a bit of a leading indicator sort of perspective, right? Because you're always kind of looking at data and where we're headed. And where do you think we're headed? Do you think that the industry, and Phil and I talk about this all the time, like Phil's obviously a guru, so he's always like leading us in terms of like thought leadership. But from your perspective, I feel like everything you just said, the screaming sort of statement is vegetation management and sustainability and the environmental impact. That integration is going to become more at the forefront, more pronounced, and almost like it's going to be demanded, right? Like it's going to be a requirement. Is that what you're seeing and feeling? Is that where we're headed?
I think so. I mean, maybe a situation where, I got a hammer and everything looks like a nail, but I mean, I do, I do think that, that is where we're going. And it's, some of the things that we're doing now, like, helping utility companies, be better, more cooperative, community partners. I think that those are like neat stories now, that are like nice to see that good work going on. But I think that expectation that, we can't just provide cheap and reliable and safe energy. We've got to do that plus have some, not just neutral impact, but positive impact in other ways. And it's really hard to do those kind of things. They're multi-stakeholder, cross-organizational types of coordination problems that you just can't do without good software. And I don't think any big utility company is going to go buy software just so they can donate wood chips to a local farm, right? It's got we got to solve their core problem. But yeah, I mean, I think the big trends, we talked about, connected workforce, the return on investment is super obvious. just getting everybody into a single system where you can streamline communication, you can shorten the time between when the work is done and when it's audited, and these are like really, kind of like obvious, not super innovative things, but like if you have a rework for a crew and you find that 2 days after they do the work, they're probably going to be right down the road. If you find it 2 months later, they're probably going to be, in a different part of the system, and it's expensive and there's a lot of lag. So there's, those things are really a driver. And once you build that, that communication platform, then you can start to innovate. And so, there's connected crews. There's, we talked about cybersecurity. There's challenges there around, can you support bring your own device, right? And this is a question that utility companies are wrestling with, and sometimes moving at different speeds, and sometimes coming up with different answers. But the idea that when you bring on a contractor, that they're going to have all the equipment they need to do their work. That's going to include a smartphone or a tablet where you can securely log in and get your work, and then communicate, back to your contractor manager, communicate back to the arborist, to the Atlas arborist that's doing the inspections and the safety audits, and communicate back to the vegetation manager. The other big trend is definitely remote sensing. When we did our first transmission vegetation management project in 2008, and that organization was, in the middle of a LiDAR project. So we were bringing in, tree crown polygons into our software as early as 2009. It was very expensive to do LiDAR. It took a long time to get the data processed. And this was, a lot of this was like, survey grade LiDAR, because they weren't just looking for vegetation. They were rebuilding their structure models and looking at sag and all that. But, it's taken a long time, but I think we finally got to a point in the cost curve and also the speed of processing this data where, there are companies using satellite imagery. There are companies, flying much lower cost aircraft with more powerful, lower cost LiDAR. There are companies flying camera systems and using data that other stakeholders have bought and that are now licensing that for vegetation management. There's more going on in the remote sensing world than I've ever seen, and paying attention to this stuff for a decade and a half. It's here. I don't think that we've answered all the problems, but you add to that the fact that UAVs are real. I just saw that Florida Power and Light just had a news article. There's a local news story that they just flew their unmanned kind of modified Cessna, in the first beyond visual line of sight approval. According to the article, first, BVLOS outside of a FAA test site, and so they're
pretty innovative. They're pretty ahead.
So you've got you've got all these sensors, you've got these aircraft, you've got regulations, starting to be figured out. We're going to have a lot of remote sense data, and then the question is going to be, what do we do with it, right? How do we pull the right work out of that data, that ocean of data, and get it to the right people in the field?
Hey, Chris, we hear a lot about AI. Where is the industry? Do you think, obviously it's where the future is, but just talk to us a little bit about your perspective.
Yeah. So Clarion we're not directly involved in applying AI to our work, to our little part of the work, but it's hyper relevant to the remote sensing, and I think that there's a part for us in that, but I think that we're not going to be the tip of the spear there. So I follow AI, and I think we're probably talking specifically about machine learning, the subset of AI that's applicable to analyzing images and 3D point clouds from LiDAR and photogrammetry. There's no doubt that AI is real, right? I think it might have been Kevin Kelly, but somebody that generally in the technology world said we think about AI until it works, and then when it really works, we don't think it's AI. But you open Google Maps or Apple Maps, and you better believe there's AI going on to route you and real time route you. But we don't think about, wow, this is artificial intelligence, right? It just works. And I have a friend who started a company using machine learning models to analyze images and content, more for like marketing purposes, and it's incredible what this stuff can do. And the use cases for vegetation management are really they're real. I mean, there's real work going on, and if we can figure it out, then the speed and the accuracy and the usefulness of this huge remote sense data, this raw data, it's gonna happen. It's gonna be very impactful, I should say. So what do we need to get there, and how fast are we going to get there? Is a really interesting question. So my perspective on AI and machine learning is, look at your photo apps. I don't know if you've seen Google or Apple. It's like, hey, give this person, look at this big group of pictures and tell me who this is. Like, oh, that's my son. Right? Give them a name, and they're just going to keep adding pictures in. And sometimes they'll put a picture in and say, hey, is this your son? And I'm like, no, that's not him. But these two are. I'm training a machine learning model, right? If you've ever logged into a website and it's like, hey, we're not really sure who you are, you need to click on the photos that have a crosswalk, right? Or which photos have a boat on a trailer, right? You're like, well, you're training a machine learning model to recognize those things, and computers are really good. These AI computer systems are really good at picking up patterns. And so the question is, what patterns can they pick up? I mean, I know that they can determine, what's a picture of my 17-year-old son, and they can find a baby picture and say this is the same kid, right? Those models have been trained by a lot of people on a lot of phones. How do you train a machine learning model on something so niche as utility vegetation management? And there are a lot of people working on it. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of new capital coming into the industry. I think a lot of it's focused around remote sensing, data processing, and AI. And it's about the volume of images and data that you're analyzing, and how many people are giving that model feedback, right? And it's professional feedback.
Chris, on that capital that you're talking about, is that, when you say new capital, is that new capital deployed by the existing big players? Is this like completely independent software players that are saying, hey, we just see some things we want to solve for here? Like, what does this capital look like, and where is it really being allocated?
I think it's definitely both going on. I think there's some big players that are seeking to innovate. Definitely some big names that people on listening to this and others would recognize. But there's also some startups that are getting capital from more traditional enterprise. From what I understand, more traditional enterprise, private equity focused folks. So yeah, it's exciting to see, and I think the question for the industry is, do we do what we're doing now, which is well-funded companies, competing to build the best, model to do species identification. I mean, they're extracting, poles and wires. And the better that machine learning model gets, the faster and more accurate those data extractions are going to be. And instead of waiting 6 months to get your data, if these machine learning models get good, you're going to have much higher accuracy data, much faster. Tree health risk from multispectral imagery. I mentioned species identification. Of course, there's just encroachments, around the wire. So, there's the approach of let's get a handful of companies competing and let's see who can build the best model. But that's a little bit in conflict with the fact, to my understanding, that a model gets better. A model gets better with more images and more training. So, when I take a minute and step back and think about this, like, yeah, maybe the UAA needs open source machine learning model that all these remote sensing data processing innovators can feed into, and then all of the arborists that are doing desktop review of the results and then field review of the results, they can feed their input, they do their validation back into one model, and that's going to move it faster. And then eventually someone will have to go physically to the place where the work needs to be done. Ideally, I think the vision is that it maybe doesn't have to be an arborist needs to look at everything that remote sensing identifies as needing to be looked at. Maybe we can get that. We're actually working on a project right now with a customer to kind of automate the determination of what equipment and what crew types need to go where, based on terrain and access and all that kind of stuff. That's not really a machine learning problem right now, but eventually, you got to get somebody there with a chainsaw or a bush hog, and hopefully they have the right size, bucket truck and then they've got to do the work. So I think the play for us is, is the company that's helping get that work out to the right people, and get them to the right place. Just a few things that we can ask the crew leader, or the QA arborist, give some feedback to the machine learning model that way. How good was our species identification? Was this tree really at risk? Those are some areas where I think we can play.
We're definitely going to have to continue this discussion in Atlanta, either at a Braves game, or what I can't wait to do is if Georgia Tech ever plays West Virginia, then I get to watch both of your alma maters and both of you kind of duke it out in some sporting complex. So, Chris, it was awesome to have you here today. Yeah. I love the conversation. Yeah, fantastic. Can't wait to see you very soon, my friend.
Yeah,
it was fantastic. Thank you.
Tej, thanks for the invite. Phil, great to talk to you.
Very good. Thank you, Chris.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Be well.
That's it for this episode of Trees and Lines, brought to you by Iapetus Holdings. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. If you have any questions or comments on any of our episodes or ideas for topics or guests, we'd love to hear from you. Please contact us at treesandlines@iapetusllc.com. We'll chat with you soon.